Welcome and good afternoon. This is Commish Orr. Today we're going to take a look at History Maker Baseball and compare it to my list of top 9 or 10 must-haves. This is a continuation of my series. I've done this with Season Ticket Baseball and Payoff Pitch, so you may check those videos out if you are interested in those games. Today I'm going to check out History Maker Baseball, which is another game I've featured on this channel and actually used it in a recent project where I did a best franchises, all-time franchise greats using the all-time franchise greats set. I did a tournament with those teams, and so I had a chance to kind of test out History Maker Baseball, which is a very unique game. So I thought I would, again, continue the series and talk about how it compares to my must-haves. I had my top 9, but there's one that can be actually split into 2. And so everybody likes top 10 lists, so that's what we'll do today. So let's get right into it. Number 1 on my list is statistical accuracy. And I would say History Maker Baseball is pretty accurate, though not probably with the same attunement or whatever than other baseball games may be. Most games work either on some percentages or the player ratings and such have or player results have some percentages built into the system or whatever. And History Maker Baseball is a little bit more complicated than that since it uses a chart system, but more importantly uses a trait system rather than a numerical rating system. So players are rated with traits, ace and slugger and that kind of thing, rather than a numerical rating system. And so, for example, batters have, I'm not sure exactly, I'd have to look to see exactly how many, but let's say 7 qualities or a range of 7 quality names that represent, let's say, batting average. So there isn't as much differentiation there, perhaps, as some other games that can really tune it down to specific batting averages. Now, some may think that that's not that big of a deal because, in the grand scheme of things, with the way numbers play out and statistics play out, a 320 hitter isn't likely to hit exactly 320 just because of statistical nuances and such. So maybe a range of 7 different factors for batting average, let's say, from highest to lowest, is still representative of a fairly accurate game, if that makes sense. But it's just something to keep in mind. It doesn't have as much of that discrepancy or differentiation between players in some cases when it comes to ratings. Likewise, players don't have a separate stolen base rating from a running rating, and so those traits are lumped together, for example, and to active base runners and so forth. And we know that historically there are a lot of players that are good base runners but not good at stealing bases, for example, and vice versa. So it's just something to keep in mind. There's they're not quite as fine tuned as that in terms of the traits. So while overall I would say it's fairly statistical accurate, it probably doesn't have it's probably not quite as in line if you're doing a replay, for example, than other games would be in terms of how they're able to fine tune things and hone in on some of that stuff. The second thing I have here is all plays in the game. And I think this is probably the one category that History Maker Baseball really shines. And what I mean by that is the results feel realistic. There's a lot of description in the results, so you can kind of visualize what's happening. Umpires come into play, it's one, if not the only game that umpires actually are a factor. And so, sometimes an umpire makes a call that changes the course of the game, which again doesn't happen in other games, but does definitely happen in History Maker Baseball. And So stuff like that. Chemistry, team chemistry comes into play. Uh, and that kind of thing. So I would say, in terms of all plays in the game, History Maker Baseball does a great job of incorporating all of the things that one thinks about for baseball into the game. Even things that most other games do not. Like, most other games don't take into account team chemistry and that kind of thing. And so I really appreciate that. Really, really appreciate that. Um, Third on my list was lefty righty splits. I know there's a lot of disagreement on how statistically accurate you can be with lefty righty splits, if it's an actual skill that batters have, or it's more general than that. And History Maker Baseball definitely follows in the more general category, in the sense that individual players aren't rated for lefty righty, but lefty righty does come up in some results, because some results occur if the pitcher has the same handedness as the batter. So a righty pitcher and a righty batter, or a lefty pitcher, a lefty batter, some of the results change based on that. So it definitely incorporates lefty righty splits in a general sense. But if you're looking for something where individual players are rated based on how well they did with those splits, you're not going to find it in this game. Next up is base running, and this is one that I split into two different categories. First, we're going to talk about steals. Now, as I said before, players in History Maker Baseball are not rated separately for stolen base ability and just runner ability in general. They have one flat rating that encompasses both. They're a one running rating, and they're either rated as like active, for example, that kind of thing, or stoic, I think, is the other one, based on how often how they are on the base paths, I think. So if you're looking for that differentiation, you're probably not going to find it here quite as much. But if you just generally, Ricky Henderson is going to be rated well, and he's going to perform like you would expect him to perform. The one thing that I don't care for is that there are occasionally results where a player gets a stolen base after, where it says, after this play, if there's a runner on first, he steals second, regardless of the runner's stealing ability. So I realize that sometimes very, very poor base runners do get freak stolen bases and that kind of thing. So maybe it's trying to model that. But occasionally there will be plays that stolen bases occur without any judgment or whatever on the player involved. They just happen. And so when that happens, it doesn't really make me feel good about the steal system. So it's just something to keep in mind. Runner advancement. Runner advancement is very similar. It's more simplistic, I would say. So if you're looking for a real simulation, a realistic simulation of base running, again, it's very, very much more simplistic here. Maybe like a strat basic or something like that. Because again, players do not have they have one overall running rating that accounts for stolen bases and runner advancement. But for most cases, runner advancement is just based on the die roll, the play itself, and not the runner's running ability. Now, if you have active base runners, then you do have some effect on base running, where they may take an extra base and that kind of thing, or they may score in certain cases. But generally speaking, there's not a lot of differentiation there in terms of base running and the running system, if that makes sense. Likewise, on 2 outs, runners score from second base with 2 outs automatically, basically. Whereas in real life, that doesn't really happen that much as you would think. I think the misconception is that it happens all the time. But if you actually look at the statistics, it does not happen all the time. It's much more common for runners to not score from second base even when you think they should. It just doesn't happen with as much frequency. But in this game, it's fairly automatic when that happens. So the runner advancement system, again, is I think it's fairly simplified and basic. If you're looking for something more real with more realism to it, you're not going to probably find it here. But if you're just looking for, general, more casual, more basic gameplay, that it's probably fine for that. The fielding system is next up, and I actually like the fielding system. Once again, players only have one fielding trait. They don't have a separate range and error rating, for example, so it's not as it doesn't have as much detail in it as other games do in that regard. They only have one overall fielding rating. Sadly, that fielding rating also applies for catchers with pass balls and that kind of thing too, and their ability to throw out base runners. That's all lumped into a catcher's fielding rating, or fielding trait, I should say. So again, something to keep in mind. There's not as much differentiation there as most other games have. That being said, when you do go to outfield or infield drama charts, which is where the fielding happens, the results feel realistic. When those charts come up and you have a gold rated center fielder, for example, he's going to make a lot more plays. He'll make the play when other fielders won't, for example. And so it's very cool and feels realistic in that sense, where fielding actually does come into play and actually helps with the results, if that makes sense. And you can very clearly see it, because if you have a team full of average fielders, you can definitely see the plays where those fielders are going to hurt you, for example. When it says if the fielder's gold, they make the play. If not, they don't, for example. So I actually like the fielding system, even though keep in mind, once again, it's a very simplified system that doesn't differentiate, catcher arm or the difference between range and error, that kind of thing. But that being said, the results feel real and accurate. They just don't have that differentiation that you may be looking for. Next up is stadium effects. And stadium effects, once again, I've said this with many of the categories here, are more simplified. One, it's great that they do have stadium effects come into play at all, because some games do not account for stadium effects at all. But the stadium effects are more simplified in the sense that the ballparks have traits much like the players do. And they're rated on whether they're a big or small park and that kind of thing. So there's not a lot of games that take stadium effects into account. It affects, home runs, righty or lefty home runs. It could affect various things with some specific results. And here it's the stadium, since it's like either big or small. Again, there aren't as many traits, so a lot of the stadiums feel the same, and so there's not as much detail in the system. But again, I think the fact that they have them at all sets them apart from others that don't, for sure. And when they do come up, it they do make a difference on occasion when they do come up. There's just not as there's not as specific of ratings and that kind of thing that other games do have. Rare play system. I really love the History Maker Baseball rare play results, because you get some really crazy stuff that can happen. My only knock on it is that they happen so rarely that they'll, I played a 32 team tournament, and only a handful of times did any rare play ever come up. So the results are just very, very, very rare. More rare than most other games that have a rare play system, I would say. So just something to keep in mind. But that being said, the actual results and differences of different rare plays is extensive. I mean, they have extensive, and they come into like the highlight reels chart and that kind of thing. So some pretty cool stuff can happen. They're just pretty rare, I guess is the best way of saying it. And then number 9, I believe, on my list is the injuries and the injury system. And once again, History Maker Baseball does something very unique that I have not come across another game that does it this way. in that they have a pregame chart where that's going to determine things like team chemistry based on winning and losing streaks, which I think is very unique also. But they also are going to talk about messages that you could get from the team trainer, for example. And that's where injuries often show up, is the team trainer will come to you and say that so-and-so is injured, and then, it could be the injury length could be various lengths. But I think that's pretty cool and feels better than some games where, I look at Stratomatic, for example, where injuries only happen on a couple of different types of plays. And generally that's not the way they happen in real baseball. I don't believe, yes, you can get injured from getting hit by a pitch. Sure. You get injured striking out. Sure. But a lot of the injuries happen in baseball on, collisions or they can happen off the field or, that kind of thing. A whole variety of different ways. And I like that History Maker Baseball takes this into account with the team trainer giving you a report on a player's injury that happened, rather than having them only occur during specific plays, if that makes sense. So once again, that's a very, very big standout of History Maker Baseball. And then finally, I have out distribution. And I think out distribution is pretty good in the sense that some, plays, outs happen based on a right or left-handed batter. It's either a ground out to third or ground out to first, for example, or a fly out to left or a fly out to right. Those plays are thrown in there based on the handedness of the batter. So I do like that it has that kind of out distribution. Overall, the game is more, in many cases, is more simplified than other simulations. Other than, as I said, it gets very, it has umpire ratings where the umpire comes into play. It has the pregame charts where you take into account, those also have weather. Pregame charts which take into account like things that happen off the field that can modify the players on the field. And so, in that sense, it's goes much more detailed than other games, but overall it's more simplified. And so out distribution, once again, isn't based on specific players, but it's based on the handedness of the batter only. And so I think that's good, though. I mean, it's better than some where the results are regardless of anything, really. There isn't really attention paid to out distribution and how it should be and how realistic it should be. So in that case, I think it does a step above what other games might do. And then, so all of that said, those are my top 10 things. A couple of the intangibles is, one, you can't get PDF seasons. So I played strictly on the computer, so you really can't get PDF seasons. Or I guess I take that back. I think you can get a couple of PDF seasons, but they're not very frequent. Mostly it's going to be a physical game that you buy. The cards are very small. You can make your own, though. There's a lot of a big community of making your own, and they even give you rules for how to make your own cards, which I think is also cool, something that other games don't do. They give you the tools to make your own cards, so you can recreate a season, recreate a team, do whatever you'd like. You buy the separate manual on how to make player cards, and then you can use that to create player cards for whoever you need to create them for. So that, again, is something that no other game does. Really appreciate that part of it. Customer service, second to none. It's right up there with the other games that I play in terms of customer service being great. And so overall, I'd say the strengths for me are the uniqueness of the trait system, umpires coming into play, the pregame charts, which are very unique. And then the intangible thing is the fact that it clearly, since it's trait-based and the die rolls give you a play result that is descriptive, it's very easy to visualize the game in your head as it's being played. You don't get a result where it's like ground out to short. You get shortstop makes a diving play or, whatever. It's a very descriptive. And so it's a game that lends itself to visualizing the story in your mind as it's happening. So it's probably second to none in terms of that and of that piece of it. On the negative sides, I've kind of mentioned this before, but it's a very simplified game in terms of differentiating between player abilities. The scale isn't quite as wide, I don't think, as other games are. And so, and then the fact that there's only one rating for running, for example, and one for fielding. So you don't get the nuances of a catcher that was really good at throwing out base runners, but other than that, not a great fielder. You don't get that nuance with this because it's all lumped into one rating. So those are kind of some negatives. I did enjoy playing it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's probably not on my top game that I want to go to, but I could definitely see using it for certain projects and having a lot of fun doing so. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully that you enjoyed that. If you're on the fence about History Maker Baseball, I definitely recommend checking it out. Because again, your top things might not be my top things. And so it may not, some of the things that I critiqued it for may not matter to you as much. Likewise, some of the things I love about it, you may not like as much. So definitely check it out. It's a great company with a lot of great customer support. The creator of the game, Keith, is very accessible. And so there are a lot of positive things with the company and a lot of positive things with the game. I definitely like the fact that it went a different direction. So in terms of just uniqueness, it's more unique than any other game that I probably played. It's just so unique. And so I really love that. So hopefully you will too. Very quickly, I do have a couple of projects going right now. One with Season Ticket Baseball, one with Payoff Pitch. You can go over to baseballmaelstrom.com to check out that action. Or you can look at those playlists here on this channel, and you can see video updates of either actual played games or just updates in general on those projects. With all that said, let me know your comments down below. If you love History Maker Baseball, if you hate History Maker Baseball, leave those comments down below. And I appreciate you stopping by and watching. And until next time, have a great evening.